was one of the oldest people in the academy, and one of the instructors pulled me off to the side and said, "Hey, Ash, you're the fittest guy in this room. You're also the oldest guy in this room. Why is that?" And I said, "It's my responsibility to keep myself in good physical shape. I know it takes this job seriously."
That's what you should strive to be when you take this job, is an asset, not a liability.
Yeah, the best way to learn those things is through experience, but experience is painful. Experience is costly.
If you punch me and I punch you back, generally would that be allowed? You're the bad guy, I'm the good guy.
We're talking about like a street fight?
No, we're talking police stuff here, James. How do you help people make the determination?
You have to do scenario training. So you have to run scenarios that are well crafted. You have to put people in situations to make those decisions and then be able to say, why did you do that?
What is de-escalation?
So let's say I'm the cop coming in the room and you're, bad guy. I'll try to change your mind so that you don't choose violence. That's de-escalation. Ooh,
yes. But someone introduces a knife to you.
I was in a situation like that.
So, hey, what's up, everyone? I'm Ish. I'm here with James, and this is our first segment of No Cop Out. So basically, where we have conversations to address the challenges of policing head on. I oftentimes see a lot of companies and brands and podcasts that start the conversation, but they never really dive into the meat of stuff. So with today, I kind of just want to cover the big buzzword in our industry today.
Okay.
De-escalation, right? But with it is a great word. Sounds amazing. And on paper, fantastic. What is de-escalation? And with de-escalation comes the OODA Loop. And what is the OODA Loop? And with the OODA Loop comes the use of force continuum. And with the use of force continuum comes an array of other things. So I'm hoping to kind of just touch on stuff that'll hopefully benefit, newer officers or, people who've been on the job long enough. And obviously the industry is always changing. I call it an industry. I know it's more than that, but the industry is always changing. Sure. And as a cop, you have to kind of improvise, adapt, and overcome and stay with the times so that one, you're approaching things the right way. Case law is always coming out. You don't stay up to date with case law. You can be fired tomorrow or end up in prison. Yeah, this is a hard job, man, where you have to be not only tactically proficient with the actual skills, but you have to be technically proficient. You have to know the state law, local ordinances. You have to be on top of all of those things. You have to be a legal professional, a consummate professional of how you interact and deal with people, and you have to have a warrior mindset, and you have to keep yourself physically, mentally, emotionally sharp. It's a hard place to be. Physically sharp being the one that a lot of people tend to put to the side, which, like I said, this is going to be hard conversations. And how many people do we see that aren't physically inept? Is that a good word to use? Yes, there's a lot of people that one of the academies I went through, I was one of the oldest people in the academy, and one of the instructors pulled me off to the side and said, "Hey, Ash, you're the fittest guy in this room. You're also the oldest guy in this room. Why is that?" And I said, "It's my responsibility. It's my responsibility to keep myself in good physical shape." When I was in high school, it was a luxury. It was something I did because I wrestled, because I was in sports. When I left high school, I went into the military. And at that point, my physical capacity became my responsibility so that I can come home to my family, so that I could protect the people I was serving with and to protect the people that I was serving for. So it's not just something that I want to do. It's not just a luxury anymore. It is now a responsibility. And I carried that mindset into law enforcement as well. And I think there's a lot of folks that are in law enforcement or in the military, or even as a firefighter or an EMT, that don't see their physical capacity as a responsibility. No, I would agree. Especially, we'll say first responders in general. And that encompasses security, nurses. Correct. If you're not, and doctor, if you're not physically in shape, I think that plays a lot into the mind, psyche, and all that stuff too. For example, with an encounter, if I think if you're physically in shape, you tend to be, what gets you there builds your mind, right? It's all connected. So you tend to approach situations a little more differently because you approach yourself differently. And before we get into all that, I kind of just want to introduce myself for those who don't know. I've been in law enforcement for about 9 years. I'm a defensive tactics instructor. I'm a firearms instructor. And the thing that kind of differentiates me from a lot of people is I have a genuine passion for training, for learning all aspects of law enforcement, right? I love the defensive tactics, the grappling, the hands-on, if they pull a weapon, like I love all that stuff, the firearm stuff. I love the firearm stuff, but I also love the classroom stuff too, right? Like, you know, and when I go to a class that's like a de-escalation class, you spend there for 8 hours and you just see videos of cops making stupid mistakes, right? And it's like, oh, they didn't de-escalate. What does that mean? The question's never answered in the classes I've gone to.
Right.
You know, a cop pulls out a gun and unfortunately discharges his weapon. Oh, I should have de-escalated. No, what he should have done in this case was go hands-on and get physical control of this human. Like, if you're asking my opinion.
Sure.
But it's always, oh, something went wrong, they didn't de-escalate. And there's a lot that goes into that.
We should talk about that.
We should. And this isn't I know everything, he knows everything. I'm a huge proponent of listen to as many people, watch as many videos, and apply it to yourself. That's the biggest thing. You know, listen to a lot of sources and apply it to yourself. But that comes with a caveat, right? If you don't have something to apply it to, that's the biggest problem, right? If I listen to you and I listen to you and I don't do anything, I don't have anything to back that.
Right.
Who's right, who's wrong? I don't know, because I don't have anything to input to that. But if I listen to 10 of you and I also do this, I can start applying that to myself. Ooh, I like how that works. That's actually been very beneficial for me. Maybe I'll start training that a little more. I don't really like how this goes.
It's almost like things have to be pressure tested.
Ooh, yes. And that's, you know, and that's another thing we see. We see, oh, this new product comes out. It's supposed to do this. Let's sell it. Okay, before we get there, it sounds good, but like, what does it do? Why does it do it? Who's tested this? What tests have you guys ran?
Does it actually apply?
Does it actually apply, right? Like when the taser came out, it was the best thing since shoestring. How many times have we seen a taser fail now? Whether it's clothing, whether it's not connecting, like it can't be your end all be all. You can't put your bank, and this is another thing I hear. Why am I going to train when we have a gun and a taser? Well, you should also be training with those too, but there's so many things that comes.
Those aren't problem solvers. They are tools that you as the officer need to use to solve the problem. So a little bit of my background. Joined the Marine Corps in 2001, was in for 5 years, got out in 2005, and got recalled back in, got a letter in the mail saying, hey, we miss you, can't live without you, welcome back, high five. Deployed to Iraq, came back from Iraq in 2008, and been in law enforcement pretty much ever since then, with a short caveat of time where I was just running a private business doing training, and a period of time when I was in the fire service. But the rest of this time, I've been in law enforcement. I did the math last week, and I've got about 20 years of active law enforcement service. Well,
I appreciate your service to our community and to our country.
Thanks, man.
So given all that, let's talk about like what is de-escalation, right? Because oftentimes we get told de-escalation is something you have to do.
It's a buzzword that I think is used way too often. De-escalation is something that we allow the other person to do. So let's say I'm the cop coming in the room and you're, bad guy or someone in a crisis, and you're all riled up. You're potentially going to be violent. You haven't been yet, and I want to de-escalate, right? What I need to do is facilitate an environment where you choose to calm down. I can't make that happen, but I can try to facilitate that environment. I've been going through a lot of the negotiator training, like for the special response team and stuff like that. And the first thing, like their entire goal is to de-escalate, right? And it's usually over the phone or, it's all verbal, but you've got to build rapport. You've got to create an environment for de-escalation to happen. It's not something that I can do to you. I can't de-escalate the situation because I'm there to solve the problem. Maybe that problem is you need to go to jail. Maybe that problem is you need to be going to a psych facility. Maybe that problem is you need to go home because you're drunk. But I'm there because I have to solve the problem. And if you're all riled up, I would really like for you to calm down. I would like not to be in a fight. But I'm going to be here to solve that problem. The problem is going to be solved. I'm going to try to give you the opportunity to de-escalate. And I'll try to build rapport with you. I'll try to get you to relax. I'll try to change your mind so that you don't choose violence. That's de-escalation.
Which over the phone is amazing because you have that time. Everyone's safe. Everything's
right.
Relatively, they're usually barricaded or something. Right. You're in the comfort of.
But as the officer in the room, you don't always have that time. You don't always have that luxury. I can't force the situation to de-escalate. I'm there to solve the problem. And maybe that problem is I'm trying to keep a family safe and you're not allowing that to happen. So at some point, I'm going to decide he is not de-escalating. I'm going to have to use some degree of force. Maybe that's pepper spray. Maybe it's a taser. Maybe it's hands-on. Or in the most extreme case, maybe it's a higher level of force like a beanbag or lethal force. But that's not a choice that I'm making. It's a choice that you're making.
It's interesting you mentioned that because one thing I think a lot of people don't understand that as officers, we're legally allowed to escalate the use of force to effect an arrest or a control.
Right.
And all we're being told now is de-escalate, de-escalate, de-escalate.
If you can.
If you can, absolutely. But when someone, we're going to be very specific.
Sure.
Someone introduces a knife to you and we're at this distance. I do not have the ability to foster an environment of de-escalation.
Right.
I now have to use an escalation of force to stop the threat.
Right.
So it's almost like they're always combating each other.
They are. In a case like that, it's never a good idea to go hands-on if someone's brought a weapon into the fight. There might be cases when you're already hands-on with someone and they pull a weapon and you happen to be fighting over that weapon, right? I was in a situation like that. But if I had to choose, if we're at this distance and you pull a knife on me, I'm not going to bum rush you. I'm going to make some space. I'm probably going to pull my handgun out and I'm going to try to convince you to put the knife down if I can. And if not, then that's a choice you made.
There was just a video online where the lady came out. He knocked on the door. The lady came out, just slashed him.
Yeah, I saw it.
No ability to de-escalate. Although he tried. He backpedaled, pulled his gun out, told her multiple times, which it worked out in that instant.
Yeah, I would have pulled the trigger a lot faster on that case.
But let's say she would have dropped. And this is why I want to have these conversations because people are like, I would have done this. And then boom, that's the end of it.
Yeah.
The comment's over. Now they're arguing, you're fat and ugly. And it's like, what does this have to do with the conversation?
And I say that not having been there.
Exactly.
Right. I wasn't there. Go ahead.
Take everything with a grain of salt because at the end of the day, every situation is different. But listening to, I love the Monday Night Quarterback, and it's not to poop on anyone or anything it's how you learn, right? Because then you create that visual, and then if you're ever presented that, you're like, man, I've kind of been here before. I've thought about this, right? So you would have pulled the trigger a lot sooner. That would work. In that case, he had created that distance. If she would have dropped the knife, that worked. However, she didn't.
Right.
She continued, and he hesitated and ended up getting slashed. In the video, you literally see blood coming down. So it's like every situation is so unique. So it's so important to have the conversations and watch the videos and train. Right? One thing I like to do is when I see a YouTube video, it's like, oh, let's see if we can get as close to it as we can to see how I would react or what we would do differently to maybe change the situation. Mm-hmm. Which brings that use of force continuum into it, right? So de-escalation is it, and this is some classes they do mention the use of force continuum, and I'm like, okay, maybe we're getting somewhere. And I've been in classes where they don't.
Where they don't talk about it at all.
No, it's almost like a negotiation class, like a negotiator class, which I've been to.
Sure.
Been through the FBI negotiator class to be specific.
That was a good one.
Dude, they bring out the phones and you're actually like, then you're getting yelled at on the phone. You're like, do I keep going? It's like, no, yeah, you have to keep going. Great class. But yeah, I've been to these classes and it's essentially just how to talk to people. Mm-hmm. And it sounds good in and of itself, right?
It has a place.
But it has a very specific place. But then what the problem I've seen arise is you get this, and then it's like, why didn't you apply it to the dude having a psych break? It's like, well, these are different apples things. To oranges.
Totally different things.
He was not listening to anything I had to say. In this instant, I have to control the situation.
Right.
I can't control it. He's throwing stuff around, throwing stuff at people. What if the next thing he grabs hurts the next person? Mm-hmm. Like, how long do I entertain de-escalation before I have to go to the next thing of, maybe making contact or utilizing a different tool? Or
right. That's entirely situational dependent. And I think that's why it's critical that you do like scenario-based training with role players that are going to put you into decision-making processes where you have to make that choice of, do I continue to talk or do I go hands-on? The best way to learn those things is through experience, but experience is painful. Experience is costly. So if we can replicate that experience through training in some capacity, that's the best way to do it.
Were you there for our scenario-based training when I was in the taser suit?
I think so.
And then someone drive stunned me because I was in the suit.
No.
So someone, it's a suit. It's a Velcro suit for those who don't know. And our tasers, you can buy a package where you'll get male cartridges with a Velcro male tip, and it'll shoot out and attach to the female Velcro of the suit. Mm-hmm. It's you can practice distance, you can practice, and then you can simulate, being tased, response or not response. Well, those are inert at the end. Mm-hmm. However,
if you drive stun
someone, that is real. So he's like drive stunning me, and I'm like, okay. And he's like, yeah.
He thought you were acting.
He thought I was acting.
Yeah. And so you get a little third-degree burn on your back.
Oh, man. So I yell, admin, and he's like, okay, yeah. And then he's like, dude, that was good. I was like, no, that was good, but that was real. He's like, oh, shut up. I'm like, dude, you actually drive stunned me. He's like, yeah, you wearing a suit. Dude, I pulled my shirt. I was like, you actually drive stunned me. He felt so bad. But situations like scenarios like that, and as an instructor, it's very important to be that role player because you can tailor the training to kind of the response you want, right? If you just get someone hot in there, they're just like, they're attacking everyone and everyone's getting shot.
Those scenario-based situations, they need to be done very deliberately, and you need to elicit the emotional response from the person in the scenario. You need to be able, it has to be very controlled.
Yeah, so de-escalation. It's an environment you create to allow someone to do it.
Right.
And I think that's probably the best definition I've heard. And before this conversation, I was kind of looking up like, what is Google's version of de-escalation? What is it? And I couldn't really find one that kind of vibes. And then we had spoken before, and I'm like, no, that's probably the best definition.
I heard that somewhere else. I didn't make that up.
Well, that's the best kind of instructors, right? You take, and you make.
Yeah.
But creating that environment, and maybe someone's at the front door and they're naked and they're having a psych break, so you kind of know maybe I say that because you are at the threshold of the door. There could be a shotgun, or there can be a bouquet of flowers on the other side of that wall. We don't know. But maybe that's an opportunity where you can de-escalate. And I'm going to use de-escalate in air quotes because it's a process when given, it's a process when given the appropriate time and environment. Mm-hmm. But oftentimes the videos we see online where de-escalation is being critiqued, that's not a de-escalation scenario.
Right.
It's not an opportunity to de-escalate. It's someone with a metal pipe chasing you. Like, how do you de-escalate someone angry, not listening? They didn't listen to their own mother. They didn't listen to their family. And now they're chasing you with a lead pipe. How do you de-escalate that? Yeah.
So I've heard some people say, the use of force can be the best way to de-escalate a situation. And that can be sometimes the best way to stop a situation. But I don't think that's de-escalation by definition. But it definitely is like when I said, you and I are in the room and I'm here to solve the problem. Sometimes the best way to solve the problem is to use force. I want to de-escalate, but maybe sometimes I can't. But I'm here to solve the problem, and the problem's getting solved one way or the other. So I have to decide, how long am I going to give you the opportunity to de-escalate? And where is that line where, all right, hey, you go that way, I go this way, and we're just going to go hands-on because this isn't working.
And that would be de-escalated because he would no longer be...
Well, it solves the problem.
Yeah, right. Solves the problem. And this isn't a de-escalation is poop. No, it
has a place.
What is de-escalation? Yeah. Because I've been to many classes where I still walk out like, I know what de-escalation means when you put the word escalate and then D together. I know what that means, but how does that apply in the job I'm doing, right? Like a lady upset at the cash register because she didn't get her appropriate change. I go, hey, ma'am, let's talk. Like, that's de-escalation. Okay, I understand that. But now, in the extreme case, like, what is de-escalation? It's not a definition. It's not like, boom, this is de-escalation. And that's just what I'm trying to convey.
Yeah.
There's so many things, and I want to get into the use of force continuum. Like, what is the use of force continuum? Because you mentioned in that de-escalation can occur, the process of de-escalation. So what I have here is, and it varies from place to place in the terminology, but at the end of the day, I'll try to encompass. So we have the compliant person, which usually is like cooperative controls. And one thing that people see heard in this situation is officer presence and verbal commands, right? Like we get called because you're upset. How I show up, and that we're going to talk about that. That's officer presence. But usually the training ends there, and then we go to the next thing, passive resistance, right? And then you're like, well, but like how you show up, what does that mean?
You're asking me.
I'm asking you because I have but what does it mean, like officer presence to you? What does that mean?
So I think a number of things come into play. I think the first and most obvious thing that will be perceived when you show up is it's your appearance. That's the first thing, right, in the presence. And there's a number of things that go into your appearance. One of those things is your competence. How competent are you and how confident are you? That shows. It shows when you walk up. It shows when you begin to talk. Your degree of experience and competence shows. You can't hide that. Another thing that shows is what you actually look like. What is the status of your uniform? Do you have, shit hanging off your uniform everywhere? Is it, look like you pulled out of a sea bag and put it on that morning? Is it all wrinkled up? Do you care? Do you care about how you look? Because if you don't care about how you look, there's probably a number of other things you don't care about, and you're not going to garner the respect of anybody. But what's the most striking thing about the uniform is what's under the uniform. You can have a perfectly pressed uniform, no extra strings hanging off of it. You put it on, but you're built like a bag of milk. That's going to be very different than if you've taken care of yourself and you're in shape, and whoever it is you're dealing with looks at you and goes, maybe I don't want to mess with this guy. Maybe he takes his life seriously. Maybe he takes his job seriously. Maybe he knows what he's talking about. If you show up and you look like you don't care, like you don't care about your uniform, you don't care about yourself, I'm also going to question, do you actually know what you're doing? Do you care about your job?
That comes in with your walk too. Absolutely. You come in and you're looking around, you're like, it just appears like this is below you. Like that can set someone off.
That's right.
Or set someone straight. You come in, eye contact. Hey, you involved? Or like, come over here. Let's talk. Like being very direct but not disrespectful.
There's
a line,
and you have to read the situation, and it depends on the call you're going to. If it's a call that requires you to be compassionate, if you're talking to a victim, that needs to show. You can't be Billy Badass talking to an assault victim like you're the toughest guy in town and I'm here and I'm in charge, right? You have to be compassionate. You have to show your heart. But there's a time and place to show your authority too. And you have to have the the competence and the experience to know when to do which. You got to read the situation.
No, that's a good point, because oftentimes we talk about the extreme cases of, guy with a gun. Like, how do you? But like, there's also
most of what we deal with
is not
that.
Yeah, and I get told sometimes like, oh, dude, you talk too much. You talked too long on that. But like, the mission was accomplished, and this person's like feels safe, feels comfortable, and now they can move on with the next step of their life because I took that extra 5-10 minutes. Mm-hmm. But it's in my approach, right? Like, my approach, you have to, as a cop, you have to be able to improvise, adapt, and overcome. And that comes from the highest of stressful situations. And a kid's dog just got ran over and you're responding to this call. Are you going to show up and be like, all right, put it in a bag, let's go? Like, that's right. Officer presence.
Right.
The mission was not accomplished.
Right. You have to be a good human to begin with.
And I think that's why a lot of like law enforcement in and of itself, when you think about it, it's such a like, wow, like cops. Because when you think of the ideal officer, this is what he or she should be. You should be aggressive and violent when appropriate. Mm-hmm. You should also be,
compassionate.
That's the word. I was going to say compliant. Compassionate, caring, empathetic to a degree, right?
Because it's appropriate.
When it's appropriate. If someone's like, please don't take me to jail, and you just slaughtered your entire family, it's like, oh man, I'm empathetic for you. Like, you let them go. Obviously, extreme case. But you have to be able to toe every line.
Mm-hmm. You have to be an actor. You have to be a chameleon.
Chameleon. That's a good one. Yeah, because there's so much, it's so multifaceted, and there's no answer. There's like, this is how you would approach this, which is why it's so important to listen to conversations like this and be like, man, that James dude, man, that kind of made sense. I need to start tailoring that approach. Or that Ish guy or that other podcaster. The more you dive into this, and that's training, right? Like, you're watching videos, you're listening to other officers, you're going to classes, you're talking with your coworkers. Hey, how'd you handle this? You're having debriefs after, hey man, I was talking to him and then he took a swing on me. Like, where did I go wrong? Oh no, dude, he was just upset. Or, hey man, you were kind of abrasive and that could have been.
Yep.
All that stuff you take in, apply to yourself. But if you have nothing to stand on, there is nothing to apply it to, which is why it's important that you do train. The next level, being passive resistant, usually is referred to as like contact controls, empty hand techniques, no weapons.
So an example of passive resistance would be something like, I come into the room and I say, hey, you're being trespassed. You can't be here anymore. And you go, no, I'm not going. You're not fighting me, but you're resisting. You're just sitting still. And you're not listening. This might be a good time for some conversation to take place. If that conversation doesn't work, then we go hands-on, because I'm here to solve the problem.
Yeah, and like I said, it's never so simple, right? Because now there's a product out there that can be utilized during passive control, the bowler wrap, right? If someone's just standing there, there's this company that's come out and it's like, well, they could escalate. They could de-escalate. Let's make the situation safe, and now let's use this thing. But then it comes the thing of like, okay, he's wrapped up.
Now what?
Yeah. And this isn't a push for grappling or anything like that, but I'm a huge proponent of being able to control another human being in the sense of physically.
Here's my take on that. I think that there are tools that are good to accomplish certain missions, but we as cops tend to be too reliant on those tools. Tools fail, and you always have to have a backup plan for if the tool doesn't work. If you have a skill set, if you have an ability to go hands-on, to have control over somebody, if you have that competence in that area, we don't have to be as dependent on tools. So as an example, let's look at the taser for an example. This is not a passive resistance kind of tool, or maybe we'll look at the bowler wrap. What if that doesn't work and you don't have that physical skill set? Now you're going to panic, like, oh shit. And what are you going to do as the officer who just tried something that didn't work? You're going to go to the next level up. You're going to further escalate. You're going to use more force because the tool you went to didn't work and you don't have any skill. So you're going to panic and you go to the next thing up. So we see so many videos of people, officers that have gotten into shootings when they were outmatched, outclassed by somebody. They tried effecting an arrest, and maybe they had the taser out, and then the bad guy took the taser off of them. So now the cop pulls a gun and shoots the bad guy. That's what we call lawful but awful. Probably didn't have to go that way if the officer had taken some time to invest in his own skill, learn how to retain the tool, learn how to effect an arrest without the tools. But in fact, instead they went to a taser. The taser failed. Bad guy took the taser. Now the bad guy's got a weapon.
Now you're forced to escalate because you introduced the weapon at the wrong time, wasn't able to control. So it becomes this catch-up game.
Right. Now, my opinion, and this is just my opinion, I would put that into the category of officer-induced jeopardy. You put yourself in that spot.
This is to get the juices flowing.
Yeah.
For those listening. I can understand that.
That's my personal perspective. In certain cases, this is not a blanket statement because we all have seen times when someone should have used a taser. Bad guy took it off with the intent of hurting the officer with it. And there's nothing he could have done about it. And that's a justified shooting all day. What I'm saying is if you don't have any skill, you escalate unnecessarily. You give the bad guy your tools. Now you have to shoot him. Now
you're forced to escalate because
that's just unfortunate, man.
That's
bad for everybody. Now the officer's got to live with that for the rest of their life. You know, someone's out of life now. There's a family without someone that they loved. That's bad for everybody.
And that's when I always get the messages, because I am more in the limelight of social media, and people are like, oh, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? I just want to say it doesn't matter what I think, right? Because my training and experience and capabilities doesn't match yours. So we may not agree in what I think. You know, now if you're trying to foster an actual authentic conversation, I will entertain that all day because maybe we can bounce stuff off each other.
Right.
But if you're just like a gotcha moment, it's not a gotcha moment because how I handle something may not be how you handle something. You know, I'm trained, I'm experienced. However, you have more training and more experience. So what does that look like in that situation? And not to like pinpoint certain stuff, but mentioning that the first thing I thought about was that Grand Rapids shooting.
Which one was that?
Where the officer approaches a male, goes to tase him, the male takes the taser. Well, now he has his taser.
Oh, yeah, that's what I was thinking of.
Okay, so they get into a grappling match, which unfortunately this officer had no experience in grappling. And, you know, and grappling is jiu-jitsu, wrestling, Muay Thai. There's a multitude of different grappling arts you can train, but he appeared to have none. Mm-hmm. You know, so now he's forced to do what? You have to go hands-on.
Right, you have to solve the problem.
Yeah, you have to go hands-on or introduce a higher level of force. So initially he tried to go hands-on, didn't work out in his favor, and he actually ended out in what sport jiu-jitsu would call a very advantageous position.
Guard?
Back control.
Oh.
He was on his back.
Oh, okay. I know the one you're talking about.
He was on his back.
Yeah.
If you talk to a sport jiu-jitsu person,
right,
you're like, gold. But to someone who's not trained, you're still in fight or flight mode. Mm-hmm. So then he pulls out his firearm and it's almost a contact shot.
Yeah, I remember that one.
And you're looking at that, and if you take it in and of itself, this officer was in fear for his life. Right. Fact.
He didn't have to be in fear for his life.
He didn't have to be.
Right.
If we can backtrack, and this is what I tell everyone who argues with me, I'm like, look, take this. Let's play pretend. World of pretend. If you go to a situation and then you can hit the pause button and there's, hey, if you have 2 years of jiu-jitsu training, this is how it's going to play out. Mm-hmm. You're going to take your taser out. It's going to be ineffective. You're going to go hands-on. You're going to control him. Backup's going to come. You're going to effect an arrest. He's going to be charged with whatever that was, disorderly conduct or misdemeanor, whatever.
Depends on what county you're in.
Yeah, depends what county you're in. Or option B, you don't train, right? You continue to go as you are. You're going to introduce your taser. He's actually going to take it. You're going to be in extreme fear for your life because now he has a weapon. So you're going to go to hands-on because that's probably the next appropriate thing, maybe, depending who you ask and where you're at. And you're not going to be able to take the taser from him. So now you're really scared. Mm-hmm. And you're going to shoot him. He's going to die. He's gone. His family's going to suffer. And now you have to live with the fact that you took someone's life. And if you would have had the opportunity to just change little things about yourself before that situation, this could have been completely avoided. Maybe.
Right.
Maybe.
Would you invest 1 hour a week to avoid that from happening?
So if we had that opportunity, I don't think anyone would go, nah, I still want to do this.
Right.
You got to be completely diabolical.
Right.
Most people would go, oh, yeah, you know what? What was required? 1 hour a week? I mean, it sucks, but I do not want to have option B ever happen.
Yeah.
You will invest an hour a week to get competent in controlling another human being.
It'll help.
It'll help.
A lot.
So when I say that to people, like, yeah, well, we don't have that opportunity. We don't, but we do.
Make it.
Because you know that can happen if you don't train.
Right.
It can also happen if you do train.
Sure,
right?
absolutely.
But it's less likely to happen if you do train.
If you're put in a bad spot, would you rather have this much skill to handle it or this much?
I was having a conversation with Nick earlier. I think it was Nick. It was someone. And he said 10% of something is better than 100% of nothing. Mm-hmm. Who was I just having that conversation? But I was like, no, that applies to this.
Yeah.
Would you rather be a adequately skilled blue belt or never have trained in your life?
Right.
And that's not a push for it, but it's a push for like, start thinking about what you're doing. The same thing with people who just don't have time for the gym. You are a cop. You are responsible, one for yourself. You're in a situation where you're dealing with other people's issues. A lot of them can be hazardous. A lot of them cannot be. But you have taken a job that puts you at a higher risk than a lot of other jobs. First person you should care of is yourself. Mm-hmm. Secondly, the people you are serving. You took an oath to protect this community. You can't take care of yourself. You can't take care of them. And not only that, your partners, right? Like you show up to a scene, they're counting on you because they have failed. And this is what I tell people. Like, I am confident when I go to a scene. Mm-hmm. However, if and when I fail in protecting myself,
it happens.
I want someone 100 times better than me coming. Right? Because in my mind, I just failed. So I want someone better equipped than me showing up. The last thing you want is to look back and see someone. And we all have someone in mind. Even you listening, going, and you go, oh, damn.
Right.
Send 2 more. Like, we're gonna need more.
Yeah.
But like, so, and not only that, but like your family, right? You want to go home every day, right? You got a camping trip next week. You got a family, a child, a husband, a wife. Like, you want to make it back to that. Why don't you run, train,
do something,
lift, go hiking?
And that's the thing, that there's always an excuse why not to. The gym's too expensive. The going to BJJ is too expensive. You know, if you're in this line of work, I guarantee there's someone that you work with that would love to give you an hour of their time and meet up with you. Go in the grassy yard and go train. If someone at work were to come up to you or I and say, hey, I can't afford a BJJ gym. Ish, James, would you help me?
My eyes would light up.
Absolutely. Like maybe I don't have mats, but I got grass. We can go out in the mat.
What does Craig call it?
God's mat room.
God's mat room.
We'll go out into God's mat room and we'll go train. You don't need an expensive gym membership. Pick up heavy things. We all have heavy things at our house. We can all go do pull-ups on a tree branch. We can all do push-ups. We can all go outside and hit the pavement and go running. It's not hard. There's way too many excuses as to why people don't do it. But none of them are valid.
You will find what you're looking for.
Right. If you're looking for excuses, you're going to find
it. You know, like there's gyms that are $10 a month. Planet Fitness. Not to plug them in. $10 a month.
It's an option.
$10 a month. $1 to start your membership. You mean that? And then I've said this to people and they're like, bro, it's Planet Fitness though.
So?
You have nothing right now. Right. You have nothing.
Right.
Planet Fitness, they have weights. Yeah.
Right.
It blows my mind. And then I get to a point where I'm just like, wait, do you just not want to work out? Like, just don't waste my time. Don't waste your time. Just say you don't want to work out. I just don't want to work out.
Go to Costco and buy a 50-pound bag of rice. Something, right?
It blows my mind when that I don't have time thing. It's like, well, this is a job you took. Or my favorite. Oh, let's talk about this. We'll continue with the use of force continuum. But my favorite, because this is still applies to this. Oh, they don't pay me to do this. How do you feel about that? When he's like, why don't you go to the gym? I don't get paid to go to the gym. Someone said that to me.
That makes my blood boil.
Or I'll go to jiu-jitsu if they pay for it.
That makes my blood boil. Because it is your responsibility. What you're telling me when you say that is that you don't care if you go home to your family because your work's not paying you to do that. Get the fuck out of here.
There should be...
Go deliver pizza.
Yeah, dude, I'm a huge... And this is going to maybe upset some people. There should be a yearly standard for fitness and a yearly standard... Not a standard, but a yearly combatives assessment.
I like that. I mean, we do firearms assessments. The trick with doing a mandate of anything is once you mandate it, you have to provide for it.
See, but that's because of politics. That's what politics has become.
So I worked at an agency where there was an annual fitness test. It was mandatory. You had to do the fitness test to keep the job. And they gave you 2.5 hours of overtime every 2 weeks. So they paid you for 1 hour of overtime every week to work out. And they covered a part of your gym membership. And you still had people that didn't take advantage of it.
It's actually a sweet deal, but
it's an amazing deal. But when you had a mandate, now this agency was leveraged to have to provide all of those things. And we lost other benefits. There was other things that the agency wanted to give us that they couldn't because they had to provide these because it was mandated now.
And I know there's no this is the answer, but I think it's bullshit. Yeah. You want to do this job, these are the requirements. You must test yearly. Do you accept?
I like it.
Do you accept? Yes or no?
I like it.
That's what it should be. Other jobs, sure. We want you to be a licensed technician for X. If you want to, this is the role we want you in. Okay, well, you provide me the education. I can understand that. But policing, you have to be fit mentally. You have to be fit physically. Mm-hmm. You have to be fit emotionally, right? Because that's one thing we don't talk about. If you're a hothead, this isn't the best place for you. Ego, there should be no ego in policing. No. If I mess something up, I can count on you checking me, but I can't count on being checked.
And likewise.
I can be I expect you actually. I expect you
Yep.
to come up to me yo, why did you handle that like that?
And I think with that expectation is you have to have the maturity to take the critique. You have to be critiquable.
That comes that emotional strength, right? That we should be emotionally fit. That's what I'll call it.
Yep.
Those are requirements, and it should be on every job requirement. If you want to work for us, this is our expectations, which they have, right? You have to have a valid driver's license. You have to have 120 semester credit hours. You have to have your Act 120. You have to test for us yearly and pass. That should be in there.
I like it. I can't argue with that.
What do you got to do with that? Are you going to go home and train every day? Maybe 3 times a week? However you see fit, this is what I expect of you, and this is what I expect you to bring to the table if you want to work here. That's how it should be. But now with politics, and we won't get into all that, but it's I need 1 hour on shift every shift if that's what you expect, which some departments do.
Right. It would be nice.
It would be nice.
It would be nice if
this is the standard
allowed.
I want to facilitate that standard.
Right, exactly right.
I don't want you to be a black belt in jiu-jitsu and not provide the environment for you to do that. Correct. Because this is what I want. I want to facilitate that environment. So I think the ideal thing would be having that standard and facilitating that environment. We're fortunate enough that we work for a department that they love training, and they're like, if you want to work out on shift, if you guys come up with a schedule that works for you guys where the road is still covered, there's nothing lacking there, and you have that, take it. That kind of empowers you you have no excuse. It's man, I can sit here and watch Netflix for an hour, or I can go work out. Right. I'm probably going to go work out.
Yeah, and the culture of the department, the culture of the agency drives a lot of that. And a lot of that's top down because we have leadership that leads by example in those things as well, which is great.
Yeah. When you have, you have a leader who is working out or is training, and it's like, man, if he's doing this and he's sitting behind a desk all day, I don't have any excuse, So there's our tidbit for that.
So you've got to keep yourself shape. It's your responsibility. It's just like everything else in life. No one's coming to help. Your safety is your own responsibility. As police, if I'm responding to someone to help them, I'm probably not going to get there in time to stop everything from happening. You know what I mean? The civilian has a duty of responsibility to keep themselves safe, to be aware of the situation, to get their own training, right?
No, absolutely. This isn't a law enforcement only thing. Everyone,
that's what I'm saying.
Yes.
So while I have always wanted to get to the scene in time to stop the violence from happening, rarely is that the case. Usually I'm 2 minutes out, 3 minutes out. When you're calling me, it's urgent. It's happening now. You need help immediately. And I want to be there. But guess what? No one paid me to go train. No one paid me to go to learn something. You know what? No one's coming to help. And as cops, we want backup. We want good backup, but we can't rely on every other person coming to be better than us. So it's up to us. And guess what? When I'm coming to someone for backup, I want them to look back behind them and be like, oh, thank God it's James. I want to be the asset. I don't want to have to rely on another asset. But I pray to God, if I look back behind me over my shoulder, it's someone that I know takes this job seriously. And if it's a victim calling 911 for help, I hope to God that the cop that shows up to help them out, that victim can look at them and be like, thank God this person's here. They know what they're doing.
That's what you should strive to be when you take this job, is an asset, not a liability.
Yep.
Because this is a very very wild job when you think about it. Like, no one's calling you and going, although I did have one lady, she was older and alone, and I helped her out before, and she would literally call to check in on me at work. So my point kind of, but no one's calling you like, hey, how are you guys doing today? You good?
Right.
Nope, nothing wrong. Just wanted to see what's up. All right, have a good one. Make sure you put this in your report. Like, we're not handling that.
Right.
And usually it's, I couldn't solve this issue, so I'm calling someone who I expect to solve the issue.
Right. They're calling because they're having the worst day of their life.
Yeah.
Or the worst day of their week.
And the worst day of their life could be golf carts in the neighborhood.
Someone moved the broom on my front porch.
And that could be it. Or the worst day in their life can be a very unfortunate situation. Right. We don't get to dictate that. So we need to be ready for whatever gets thrown at us, because you've been doing this 20 years.
About that, yeah.
I've been doing it for about 9 years. I still go to calls where I'm like, whether it's simple or like not serious or serious, where I'm like, how do I handle this?
Absolutely. So do I.
Like, you're always dealing with something new, and I love when like, you're the law, you're supposed to know this. Lady, I have never gotten a complaint about a golf cart on a path that is, and this is a real call. There was a golf cart going on a access road. However, the access road just said, keep clear for emergency vehicles. Didn't say no parking. Wasn't owned by anyone. It was owned by like the township, but like there was no signs, and they just didn't want these golf carts crossing there. Like, this is very, very unique situation for me. Like, I don't have this answer, but I will find it for you.
Sure.
I will find it for you. But there's situations like that where you're like, well, now you have to study up on that. What are the golf cart laws? What are the access road laws? What are the
Right.
So as a cop, you have to be able to not only know things, right? You want to know a lot, like obviously Tennessee versus Garner, all that, you want that stuff, you should know.
Yeah.
However, if you don't know stuff, you have to be able to find out. That's a very important trait in an officer, being able to find things out, being able to conduct research quickly and effectively. Because this golf cart thing may not be serious, but like, let's say you're dealing with something, you effect an arrest, And now you're like, man, like this is a lot more than what I anticipated in the investigation. You have to be able to figure it out as you go. You know, so that's another important thing. So we go on to the next one, active resistant. We're back on the use of force continuum. Active resistant, which is usually compliant techniques, which we talked about.
So an example of active resistance would be, I'm saying, hey, you're under arrest, and I'm trying to get a hold of your wrist, and you're pulling away from me. So you're resisting, but you're actively resisting against me. It's not like before where I said, hey, leave, and you're like, no, but you're not fighting. Now you're actually resisting actively. You're pulling away. You're not striking at me.
You're not essentially trying to do something to the officer. You're just preventing him from doing something to you.
Right. So to paint the picture of what that is.
Okay. And we kind of touched on that, like what that would look like.
Right.
So the next level would be assaultive or bodily harm. And that's where we would implement defensive techniques. Maybe.
Such as?
You know, let's say someone's advancing on you, right? Like you're not pulling your arm away. Now you're chesting me.
Right.
You're
swinging at me.
You're grabbing my shoulder. You're swinging at me.
Sure.
Maybe defensive techniques, hands-on control. Like that's the stuff.
It's really dependent.
Yeah,
Like,
it's very, very dependent. But like I'm trying to find like the general categories that I've heard in class and stuff like that. So like they're not trying to hurt you.
oh, they are. If they're active.
Okay,
yeah,
that's
they
fair.
are.
That's fair.
They're swinging at you.
I guess it's not like serious bodily harm. They're
not
pushing you.
right.
They're whatever. Like that's where like if someone puts their chest on you, that's a very active situation.
Right.
Can you tase them?
Depends on the
situation.
and the rules of your department and your county and all of those things.
But like,
But there's no clear cut answer on it.
there is not. Everything's situation dependent. I guess I'm trying to kind of like when people are like, oh, why do I need to learn how to grapple? I'll just shoot them.
This is the gray area where I think it's the hardest for people that are not trained in this to look at and have an answer. It's not intuitive. Most people would say, well, just tase them there. We can't tase in certain circumstances. It has to be, something. It has to be something physically dangerous. It would have to be an act of assault. I mean, they would be swinging at us, right? But every situation's a little bit different. If someone's watching a YouTube video of a cop that is, being assaulted or being chased, they might say, well, just tase him, just use the beanbag. Maybe their department doesn't allow them to use that level of force for that situation. This is the area where you have to have a high degree of skill. You have to have a high degree of patience under stress and duress, and you have to be able to make decisions under that duress. And yeah, sometimes the tool is absolutely the right choice.
This is another thing about, because I was just thinking, well, people, we'll tase, or use the shotgun. He's just chasing you. You can use a non-lethal shotgun, which is a huge misnomer. It's huge misnomer.
Right.
Like not really any of the tools we use is non-lethal.
Right.
Maybe
pepper spray.
Maybe a flashlight.
It'd be less lethal.
But but it can cause serious bodily harm.
Anything can.
Exactly. That's my point.
Yeah, you can strike someone, they fall and hit their head.
So is there a difference in non-lethal versus less lethal? Because I hear these two.
Yeah.
I like to intertwine them. Like it, and if we're gonna categorize things, they should be used.
They're often used interchangeably, but if you actually look at the word, less lethal means that it could be lethal, but it's less likely to be lethal.
So that would be your
non-lethal means it's not lethal. It can't.
Interesting.
Kill you. Yeah.
Because oftentimes hear these interchange, right? Like a non-lethal shotgun. Well,
I don't think that exists.
That doesn't, right. Because if I point the shotgun at the beanbag in the wrong bodily part,
right,
becomes very lethal,
right,
or you can cause very serious bodily harm.
Well, and that's why tasers are considered less lethal, because under certain circumstances they can be lethal. There are very few tools that are truly non-lethal, and a lot of them, their efficacy is pretty low. They're how effective they are. It's pretty low.
That's interesting. Yeah, because I when I was like we call ours obviously less lethal.
Right.
But I've heard conversations where like non-lethal. I'm like, that's not a thing. No, that's what they're called. So, well, what is that definition? Because if you don't even know the definition or what you're using and where it falls, how can I expect you to use that tool effectively?
Right. And God forbid you say that in court. Say, I grabbed the non-lethal shotgun. Officer, explain to me, what is a non-lethal shotgun?
Oh, it's the orange one.
Right.
That's what they'll say. That's
right.
it. But there's so many nuances. And like another thing is the perception of force used, which I don't think a lot of people think about, right? Like if someone comes up, if you punch me and I punch you back, generally would that be allowed? You're the bad guy, I'm the good guy.
We're talking about like a street fight?
No, we're talking police stuff here, James. I'm a police officer. Yep. You're not.
Okay. And I strike you.
You punch me. Can I punch you back?
Absolutely.
Post that video on YouTube. How does that look?
It looks terrible. I mean, you can do it. It's not. It may not be the best way to get control of me. It may be. It looks terrible. And that's
what I want. Like, if you can find something else that is maybe more effective than going blow to blow with this Joe or Joa. There's a female version of Joe, Susie. But if you can find a more effective method, it's not about, don't go off of perception. Right. But what I'm saying is these are things to think about, right? Because everyone has a cell phone out. And this is a very clear-cut scenario, but if maybe there's a scenario where the angle isn't there and it appears like you did something that you didn't do.
And the problem is all these things get cut. Like they'll cut it off to just show the officer striking the bad guy or whatever. So I hate censoring effective techniques because it could look bad. But the reality is there's often things that are actually more effective. Striking has a place. There's absolutely time to wrap someone on the beak. Absolutely.
I like that.
But it's not always. Most of the time, it's probably some kind of physical control tactic that you're going to get the person under control in the safest way possible for both you and them.
So when you get presented this, because you're an instructor, you've been an instructor in both the civilian and the law enforcement fields. When you get this, and I'm not going to say when can you X someone, but what is the best practice, in your opinion, for selecting the appropriate response while in the field to the levels of use of force?
Okay, so like maybe we're in a situation like, and it's active and fluid.
It's active and fluid. It's up, it's down. It's
how do you make the determination,
or how do you help people make the determination?
You have to do scenario training. You have to immerse in it. You have to get experience. And real world experience is painful and costly. But you have to get experience. So you have to run scenarios that are well crafted. You have to put people in situations to make those decisions and then be able to say, why did you do that? Did you think of this? Let's run this back again and maybe try this other thing instead. You have to facilitate learning. That you have to build competence. If you're the officer in the field and maybe you have some of this experience, maybe it's you, me, some of the people that that we work with that have, more experience. If you can detach your emotions, try to read the person, read for their pre-contact cues. Do they look like they're going to be assaultive? Are they clenching their fists? Are they bug-eyed? Are they calming down? Are they going to listen to a small ask? And this is something I use to gauge that person's reception. If you give them a small ask and they listen, you're more likely to not have to make things worse or make things more escalated. That small ask might be, hey, your wife's right in another room. Do you mind if we step 3 feet over here? And if they go, no, screw you, or, and they respond that way, this probably isn't going to go super well. But if they listen to that small ask and take 2 steps to the side, cool, maybe I can get somewhere with this guy. Maybe this doesn't have to go bad. Maybe I can build some rapport. Or maybe I can draw this out a little bit longer because he listened to that small ask. If he doesn't listen to that small ask, I'm probably going to be less likely to try to allow that de-escalation process longer because he's non-compliant. He's closed off. He's not willing to de-escalate himself. He's not even willing to take 2 steps off to the side. So that might be a tool. It's not 100%, but it's a gauge that you can use. Like where is this person's mind right now, and where could this go? So I'll read the situation, and I'll try to determine how escalated is this going to be, or can I get this guy to walk outside?
Interesting. And that all comes from putting yourself in those situations often.
Yes.
Right? Now, you said real life practice is costly.
Correct.
And could be painful.
Correct.
So the next best thing would be that scenario-based training.
And it has to be done with a good instructor, because I've seen a lot of scenario-based training that's absolute garbage, doesn't actually train anybody, or worse, it validates a specific thing. I'm trying to teach you this karate chop, and this karate chop is like, I'm going to tell you it solves all the problems. And so now I set up a scenario-based training, and I make you fail until you do this karate chop, and all of a sudden I give you a win. You're going to walk out of there being like, "Oh, this karate chop is really awesome.
Yeah, best karate chop in town.
This is going to solve all my problems." So you have to have good training.
Yeah, and the way I like to simplify it, it's like the more data you have on something, the better you can make a decision based off that data, right? If I'm a new cop and I've gone to 2 situations, I have 2 data points to bank
Correct.
off of, like how to make my next decision. If you've gone to 1,000 scenario trainings and have been in 1,000 situations, you now have 2,000 data points to now approach your next issue. So to simplify, that's why training is so important, right? Because you're always put in different situations. You're always presented different issues. It could be the same scenario, and one thing changes.
Totally changes
the dynamic of the ending. So that's why it's big proponents on training, right? If you're trained, and that's training your mind, training your body, training.
I think the biggest benefit of training is training the mind, because it allows you to take a step back, detach, and think. If you're in a high stress situation, but you don't have to be high stress, if you can take a step back and be like, hey, there was actually the situation I was in as a kid where I saw my mom do this and my dad did that. I'm going to try that here. But you can only think that way if you're not in that high stress mindset yourself. So immersing yourself in training can allow you to stay out of that, that red zone mindset where you're not able to think clearly.
Interesting. So speak on the topic of thinking and all that, I'd like to dive into like the OODA Loop.
Okay.
Right? What is the OODA Loop? So going into that, the next topic would be, going on the mindset. The OODA Loop, basically just an explanation of what is the OODA Loop and how it applies to the use of force continuum and maybe the de-escalation process.
So the OODA Loop itself, I think, is very misunderstood. It's actually a master's thesis like paper.
Oh.
It is extremely simplified down when most people talk about it. So I'll reference what most people understand it as, but that concept itself could be a 6-hour talk of just what the OODA Loop is and the depths of the research that went into it. But essentially, keeping it very simple, OODA stands for observe, orient, decide, and act. And that is how we engage with our environment. I observe something happening. I orient myself to that thing. And this was initially done by a fighter pilot. So by orient, he was referring to actually like orienting his plane, orienting his mindset, orienting his experience orienting, all of those things. It's a very complex thing, but the term orient as applied to common vernacular with law enforcement military is taking what you know and trying to orient it to the situation you're in. Then you decide what to do based on what you've observed and how you orient to it. And then once you decided, then you act. At any point during this decision-making process, what you're observing could be changing and will be changing. So every time that observation changes, this process starts over again. So it's not a loop. It is a constantly evolving thing that happens over and over and over again and cycles rapidly between each of these four things. So observe, orient, decide, and act.
That's probably the best damn explanation I've heard. It makes sense because you're constantly observing, and you're constantly orienting, right? Because if you see something new, a new stimulus, a new whatever, right, you're making a new decision. And then you're deciding.
And then when I act on something, it's going to have an effect on my environment, which is going to change what I observe. And so now I have to do this whole thing all over again.
So that actually would apply if you're able to read the master thesis and get no, I'm kidding.
Just real quick.
But it's basically what you're doing every time you're encountering a situation.
Right.
You're going through this decision-making process referred to as the OODA cycle.
Right. So a really easy example would be like someone watching, they come home from school and they're trying to break some bad news to their mom. Maybe they got a D on the report card. And so they know the last time this happened, they got grounded for a week, right? So they go up to mom and they say, "Hey, mom, I've got to talk to you about something." Mom comes in and goes, "Oh yeah, what's going on?" Or mom comes and goes, "What now?" That difference is going to change what you do on each step of this process, right? So you just observed something. You're going to orient like, "Oh shit, last time this happened, I got grounded for a week." So now you're going to decide, how am I going to navigate this? You're going to watch her facial expressions as you're talking, as you're trying to break the news. You're going to try to soften her up a little bit. And as you're talking, you're going to be reading her feedback through the conversation. And you're going to be deciding how you phrase your next sentence based on what you're seeing from her facial expressions, her eye movements, her body language. And you're going to navigate this conversation by observing, orienting, deciding, and acting, which is changing every moment when you watch your mom's face change, her body language change. That is a way that I think everyone can understand this.
Perfectly said. And I think it's very important to be able to be very mindful of this during training so that in real world situations, it becomes almost autonomous. You're going through this process repeatedly. Yeah, man, I appreciate you for jumping on. This is the stuff I wanted to talk about and ignite a conversation, because one thing we're trying to do is have the conversations that aren't being had.
Cool.
And we like to have that open platform. And I do invite, we talked about de-escalation, the use of force. We kind of touched on what the OODA cycle, the OODA loop is. And my favorite was the officer presence, right? Because that's one thing that we talk about, and then that's it. But there's so much that encompasses everything we've talked about. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. We do invite, one thing I do stress is continuous learning and training in everything, right? Study your case law, study your local ordinances, study your policy, study jiu-jitsu, study firearms, study defensive tactics, and how it all comes together in a use of force scenario. Like, make sure you're doing that. I encourage people who are listening to this or watching this to share your thoughts online. That's what starts this conversation.
And that being said, I've been doing this for a while, but I don't have all the answers. And, people have other experiences, and I am always a student, first and foremost. So if there's other experiences out there that would be contrary to what I've shared, I'd love to see those. Yeah,
I'm a huge proponent of learning and fixing, right? So if I'm doing something wrong,
fail fast.
Please tell me so I can change that. So I do invite those who may have a different viewpoint or a better way of doing things or a different way of doing things. dude, let us know. Do it in the comments or reach out to me. I'm sure James is open to that. I'm always looking to adapt things. So I do appreciate you for jumping on and having these conversations. I think this is going to be a good starting point for other people to go, oh, you know what? I want to talk about this, because cop out, you know, the no cop out series is a double meaning, right? Like no cop out. we are willing to hear everyone's encounters and experiences, and hopefully we can tailor effective conversation to better the industry as a whole. And then no cop out is also a double entendre in the sense of you can't make excuses.
No excuses.
There's no excuses. You have to have accountability for yourself, for your training, for your approach. You can't use I don't have time, or I'm not getting like, there's no excuses for anything. So the no cop out is a segment where we want to hear what officers on the street are doing, how they approach it, and have these genuine conversations to approach policing is challenging.
Yeah.
And the best way to go about facing those challenges is these conversations. So I appreciate you for being our guinea pig and coming on
for sure,
and sharing your experiences and kind of your thoughts in all of this, and hopefully fostering the environment for others to come up and do the same.
Perfect. Thank you, Ish. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.